will go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today to talk about all about Walmart's APDP app. This is kind of on the tailwind. This is happening right after, Walmart announced their new settlement. Settlement is going away. So we heard that a lot of you guys had questions about how to start working in APDP if you're currently on settlement. So we wanted to make sure to cover this content for you guys. Today, you have myself. I'm the VP of Marketing at SupplyPike. I'm going to be here to get all your questions, help with all the housekeeping and stuff like that. And then we have lovely Stacy Tan, who is our VP of Retail Insights. She has over a decade's worth of experience in the retail world. She is the one who leads almost all of our webinars, and we are so thankful for her. So much knowledge on everything to do, especially with Walmart. So I'm excited to have her here today leading through the content. Today, what we're going to be talking about is what is Walmart's APDP app, also known as the Accounts Payable Disputes Portal, how you can actually access and use that app to dispute deductions. That's going to be the majority of our content today. And then we're going to reserve about 10 minutes down at the end to actually do a little Q&A. So we will be taking questions throughout today's presentation, but we will also reserve some time at the end. Usually in a webinar like this, when we have 50 plus attendees, we usually do get a lot of questions. So please submit them in early, and we'll try to take as many as we can. Then after all of that content, after an hour worth of content, if you're curious about how SupplyPike can help you solve your Walmart deductions, we will do a quick demo at the end for about 5 minutes. So please stay on for that if you're just curious to learn more about us. But yeah, some FAQs, some housekeeping before we get started. Will you get a copy of the slide deck? Yes, you will get a copy of the slide deck and the recording from today's webinar. So that will be sent into your inbox in about 3 to 4 business days. So we will be sending that to you. What is the best way to ask a question? So down at the bottom, you're going to see 2 little bubbles that say Q&A. If you wouldn't mind sending your questions in through there, that'll make it a lot easier for me to manage the questions that are coming in, especially if we have a higher volume. But the chat, which a couple of you guys have kind of been experimenting with already, is a really great tool to just make comments on what you're seeing, engage with the audience. If you don't have really a question, but more of a statement, please feel free to throw it in there. Also, as we're kind of going through the webinar, I will be putting links to some of the content that Stacy, mentions, or things that we think are helpful in the chat. So keep your eye out on that. And yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I got. I'm going to hand it off to you, Stacy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melody. And right as it's my turn to start, my cat has found, I also have a cat, some wrapper to play around with. So I apologize if you guys hear him. We are working on getting our Wi-Fi a little bit faster at the office, and we'll be back to kind of regularly scheduled programming as quickly as possible. So, joys of working from home, guys. So yeah, before we get started with the content, we always like to do a very quick introduction of who SupplyPike is, especially if this is your first time joining us for one of our webinars. So we are a Northwest Arkansas-based software company, and what we do is we create cloud-based tools or applications to help our CPG partners essentially minimize their revenue loss. And we basically do that by helping to automatically detect and resolve any retailer compliance issues. So we've got 2 main apps that we utilize here at SupplyPike. One of them is called Deductions Navigator, which I'll be talking about and showing kind of at the very end of our webinar today. And we also have another application called OTIF Radar, which is really focused, of course, on the on-time in full program at Walmart, really helping you to diagnose root cause and then also actually dispute those OTIF fines that you get through high radius. So we're always really proud to share that we work with close to 500 companies today, representing over $25 billion in retail impact across just about every product category. So grocery, hard lines, soft lines, consumables. We work with clients from the entire box at Walmart. We also work with suppliers at Target, Kroger, and Amazon. So if you guys need help in any of those arenas, we'd be happy to share additional information there as well. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to go ahead and launch into the content to kind of talk about APDP. As Melody kind of alluded to earlier, just to give you guys a little bit of context, For a long time, Walmart had a program called its settlement program, where it allowed suppliers kind of on a quarterly basis to essentially settle on any deductions that they received from Walmart. So kind of how it worked in the quote unquote good old days is every quarter you would essentially get, whatever deductions you received, and these are AP related deductions from Walmart. At the end of the quarter, you could essentially, Walmart would say, okay, hey, we know that our deductions aren't always accurate, so we're willing to give you, call it 60 or 70% back of those deductions. And if you're able to give us a sampling of your PODs or your BOLs, we could give you a higher percentage back. And so a lot of bigger companies use the settlement process just because, if you're bigger, you're shipping a lot to Walmart, getting a lot of deductions. It can be a very, very painful and highly manual process if you're doing it individually. So a lot, again, of bigger companies were doing the settlement process. But as Melody mentioned, Walmart has made the official announcement that that is going away in May of 2023. So with that, you no longer have the option to do quarterly settlements at Walmart. Now, essentially, every supplier, no matter the size, will have to individually dispute utilizing Walmart's APDP portal. And that's kind of how we've led to where we are today. So if you guys have been on settlement before, or maybe you're new to Walmart and aren't familiar with the individual dispute process, hopefully this is a very good introductory course on how to actually utilize the application. We have a lot of really great webinar content around how you can actually, root cause the types of deductions you're getting, how you can get money back and stuff like that. This, again, is a little bit more operational on what the application is and how you can actually start to use it. So hopefully that context is helpful. Again, as Melody mentioned, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section and we'll make sure that we cover them as we go through the webinar. Okay, so first things first, Walmart actually used to utilize a third-party application called Direct Commerce to handle all of its AP related deductions. And this was called Direct Commerce. You had to get kind of a whole separate login to utilize it. It was a whole thing. But in Q4 of last year, they officially announced that Direct Commerce would be going away. And with that, they created and announced basically their new in Retail Link application called APDP, or the Accounts Payable Dispute Portal. So essentially what Walmart did is they took, what used to be an outsourced application and brought it completely in-house. So now you can actually view all of your deductions through APDP and also submit disputes through APDP. So if you guys are following along at home and you are logged into Retail Link, you should automatically have access to APDP. You should just have to go to the apps page and search for APDP. And it should show up. And if you don't have access to this, you should be able to just talk to your whoever your Retail Link admin is, and they should be able to grant you access. And if they don't have access, then you should be able to just reach out to the Retail Link help desk, and they should be able to basically grant your entire organization access to APDP. So a couple of things to kind of point out for those of you guys who are, again, maybe familiar with direct commerce back in the day and are now having to learn how to use APDP. So again, direct commerce, third-party application. So this was created by someone outside of Walmart. You had to key in your disputes from scratch. So essentially how it worked is you would go in, kind of create a dispute. There'd be a completely blank form, and then you'd essentially have to type in all of the necessary information in order to submit your dispute. You would submit one dispute per deduction, and then essentially you get an overall approved or denied status for the deduction that you submitted. So with APDP, again, as I kind of mentioned, it is Walmart built. So it is located in Retail Link. And so again, you should be able to automatically have access to that in Retail Link. A really big difference, and I'll kind of talk about this a little bit more further on in the webinar, is that disputes are tied to claims and invoices. So before you get one, you get one deduction, you submit one dispute. Here, you can actually tie your dispute to a claim or an invoice. So pros and cons to that. On one hand, you can be a little bit more granular with the type of disputes that you submit, but kind of the opposite side of the coin is that you can have multiple statuses per deduction. So you can get kind of one deduction on your PO, and you can have it be partially approved and partially denied depending on how you are submitting disputes. So a little more granularity, a little more control, but then of course, along with that comes, it's a lot harder to track, and it's a lot more work that you have to do a lot of times. So that's kind of high level, the big differences between direct commerce and APDP. So what hasn't changed for those of you guys who are maybe, again, newer to the process? So Walmart does contract with a company called Genpact, and they are the ones that are reviewing the disputes. From what we can see, dispute review times appear to be similar, although we have actually seen, I would say, in the last quarter that dispute review times are getting a little bit longer than before. It used to be an average of about 51 days from the time you submitted a dispute to the time you got some sort of resolution, either denied, approved, canceled, whatever it is. Again, on average, 51 days, but we are starting to see that kind of stretch out longer and longer. And I'm curious if you guys have experience with this, if you're seeing this on your side as well. But yeah, other things that are kind of the same is that you're still going to need proof documentation. So, different codes require different sorts of documentation. So easy example, if you get a code 22, 24, 25, these are all shortage related claims. If you're a prepaid supplier, you need to be able to provide a proof of delivery. If you're a collect supplier, you need to be able to provide a bill of lading. And these are the kinds of things that are required in order for you to actually get your dispute approved and to get paid back. So last thing I'll kind of call out, again, to those of you guys who maybe were on direct commerce before and are now moving to APDP, this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of that move. So historical direct commerce dispute data is not being migrated to APDP. And what this means for suppliers is that it is possible for you to see a claim in APDP, that just looks like, hey, that's money on the table, I can go after it, but actually you have already disputed this in direct commerce. So that is something to think about. If I'm not mistaken, a similar concept gets carried over from settlement into APDP. So you just kind of have to know that, hey, we settled for Q2 of 2022, so we can't touch any claims and try and dispute these claims in APDP. Because obviously, the settlement process, how it works is once you agree on a number, you aren't allowed to go back and try and get money for those kind of historical claims. So APDP, again, a little bit more streamlined. It is prettier to look at, but there can be some challenges when you're thinking about migration, either from direct commerce into APDP or even from the settlement process into APDP. So something to think about as you guys are making this move. So as we kind of mentioned earlier, Walmart is retiring settlements officially. If you guys need copies of the communication from Walmart, let us know. We'd be happy to share that with you. From what we have seen so far, they are doing it in phases. So there are a couple of settlement suppliers that we've talked to that didn't know that this was happening. And it might have been because you just did not receive kind of communication because your phase was not up yet. But basically, it is going away. So we're working with some suppliers that are saying, hey, I want to get ahead of this right now. And I don't want to wait until May 1st when it goes away. I want to make sure that I have a team in place ready to kind of get in front of APDP. And we also have some suppliers that we're working with that are like, hey, settlement's a good thing for me. I'm going to try and keep this going as long as I possibly can until May 1st, basically, until they kick me off. So different suppliers are kind of doing different things. Of course, for us, we would really try to recommend getting in front of this as much as you possibly can. We all know how often Walmart changes things, and the last thing we want is for, May 1st to come along and then you don't have a team in place or a process in place ready to handle kind of the individual dispute process that APDP requires. So one thing I did want to call out with APDP is it does allow for a process called MDC, or mass dispute creation. We actually did a webinar on this last week. So if you guys want to see what that looks like, feel free to check it out on Supplier Wiki. I'm sure Melody will share a link as well. But one thing to kind of note, so with APDP, now they've allow you to submit up to 500 disputes at a time using this MDC or mass dispute creation process. The challenge with that is that even though you can submit those 500 disputes at a time, you cannot attach any proof documentation to those 500 that you submit. So essentially what you're doing is it's kind of their workaround almost to the settlement process, where you just like submit a whole bunch, like throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. And whatever does not get approved will get kicked back to you, the supplier. And then you're basically back to square one, where then you have to individually submit proof documentation. And just kind of, I don't know if this is a fun fact, but it is a fact for you guys. Based on the numbers we've seen, so again, we work with close to 500 suppliers. When you utilize mass dispute creation, we're only seeing about an 18% approval rating kind of in that first pass, which means that, 72 or 82% is getting kicked back to the supplier. So, easy way to think about it, if you're sending 100 at a time, only 18 are going to get approved. The remaining 82, you are still going to have to individually dispute and submit proof documentation and kind of go through all the hoopla of doing it. So again, not to say that MDC isn't a step in the right direction. It's nice that you can do up to 500 at a time, but just based on approval numbers that we're seeing, it's really not going to be as beneficial, I think, as Walmart is making it sound, because again, you're still going to have to do the individual disputing process with the proof documents. Okay, so again, really wanted to help lay the groundwork so that you guys have the context and the background for why we wanted to share this APDP webinar again. But yeah, moving on to talking about accessing and using APDP to actually submit disputes. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, if you guys are following along, if you want to get to the APDP app and retail link, you just need to go to the apps page here. And then you should be able to search for APDP and it should show up. A pro tip, if you guys are kind of new to retail link or new to Walmart, is if you hit the star button next to any of the apps, that will favorite it, and then it will land, it'll basically show up on your homepage, so you're not having to search for it every single time. So I would recommend, if you are in kind of the finance silo or the AR or AP silo, to bookmark this, because it's something that you're probably going to access pretty often if you're going to start disputing the deductions that you receive. One other thing that I wanted to point out, so Walmart also has something called APIS, which again, if you guys are newer to Walmart and in the finance silo, I would really recommend taking a look at APIS. So this is where you can actually see your deductions come in. And then APDP is where you actually take action on those deductions. So APIS, is where you say, okay, Walmart took $25 off invoice, and then APDP is where you can then turn around and say, okay, give me my $25 back. So both very important applications to utilize as you guys start to get into kind of the individual dispute process. So one other thing that I kind of wanted to, remind you guys that we talked about a little bit earlier is that APDP, they do claim and invoice-based disputing. So kind of how that process works is, you've logged in, you get into the application. Where you start is essentially you need to decide, am I creating a dispute based on a claim or on an invoice? And then you need to be able to provide that claim or invoice number. And I'll kind of go a little bit more into detail onto how each step works. But just so you guys know, you can think of invoice kind of as like the parent number. So, anytime you've invoiced Walmart, they can take, and let's say you invoice them for multiple items is an easy example. They can do a deduction off the entire invoice, so they can say, hey, we didn't receive any product at all, we're going to deduct the entire invoice. Or they can kind of give you deductions based on different items within that invoice, which that becomes more of a claim level. So you need to be able to understand when you're getting deductions from Walmart at what level it is, so that then you can go into APDP and then start that dispute process. So to give you guys an example, of the claim line level disputes. So this is an example of kind of a PO that you received from Walmart. As you can see here, multiple items within that PO. So each line here is basically a claim. So you can get a code 22, which is a shortage, merchandise billed not shipped on item, 1, 2, 3, for this particular line, and you can get a different code 22 for a different line. So again, kind of how it works when you're ready to go in and actually submit a dispute is you would go in, say, I'm creating the dispute based on this claim number, put in claim, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, search for that claim. And then it should pop up here. And this is kind of what this page will look like. So at this point, you can basically decide which claim lines that you want to go after. And again, I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail on what sort of descriptions and expectations Walmart has in order for them to successfully review your dispute and get that money back. So as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, one thing to keep in mind is that you can have multiple dispute statuses per deduction. So for this, for example, let's just say you did end up submitting disputes for, line 1 and line 2. Walmart can come back and say, yes, line 1 is approved, line 2 is denied, or whatever it is. So you need to make sure, again, that you've got a system in place to keep track of what is getting approved, what is getting denied, because you actually have specific windows for you to actually go after any claims that do end up getting denied, which again, I'll share a little bit more information kind of further down in the presentation. Okay. So moving on to the actual kind of tactical part of disputing claims. So again, how you would start to dispute a claim is essentially you would go into APIS. So again, that's the accounts payable inquiry system. And you'll be able to look up, within the claim or within each of the checks, if there is a claim record. And APIS is a whole other beast on its own. I think we have webinars on navigating APIS. So if you guys just aren't super familiar with that process, we'd be happy to share those resources with you. But essentially, you need to go in and look for the claim number in order for you to say, okay, I got a deduction on this. Now I'm ready to go and fight this in APDP. So when you get into APDP, you're basically going to hit the Create Dispute button. And then from there, you're going to select the vendor number that the claim is associated with. So, a few of the folks that we work with have multiple vendor numbers. If you just have the one, the one will populate. If not, you need to make sure, that you've got the right vendor number associated, or essentially the claim will not show up. So again, you're going to create the dispute based on the claim. And then from there, you're going to type in the claim number, or you can select date ranges. So if you're trying to work on multiple claims within a certain date range, you can do that as well. But, with Walmart, it's never easy. You can actually only select a date range of 10 days or fewer. So unlike settlement process, for example, you can't go in and say, I want to work on every claim for the last quarter. You literally have to do it kind of in 10-day increments, which is not great, but that's kind of what the limitation of APDP is right now. So after you've selected that date range, obviously you're going to search for it. And then you're going to see, a list of claims that show up based on your search criteria, either by the number or kind of by that date range that you selected. And then from there, obviously you're going to find whichever claim it is that you're trying to work on. And then usually a kind of pro tip is I would match it against the claim amount, because usually that's going to be hyper specific. So make sure that those numbers match. And then from there, you're going to hit the Create Dispute button in order for you to actually kick off the dispute process. So from there, as I showed you the similar screenshot earlier, you're going to basically kind of check whichever boxes, whichever claim lines that you are trying to dispute. You can obviously kind of hit this top button to select all. If not, you can say, I'm only trying to fight line 1 and line 2 because line 3 is actually valid. it's a discount or an allowance, or I really didn't ship on it, or whatever it is. So, kind of select claim line 1 or 2. And then from there, these different fields that are kind of outlined in red are essentially what Walmart requires you to fill out in order for you, again, to have your dispute be successfully reviewed. So, item quantity, was it freight? What kind of freight was it? What kind of shipping method, your load number, dispute amount. And then just so you guys know as well, for APDP, descriptions are mandatory to create a dispute. A pro tip for you guys for this one is that you can actually keep your descriptions really short. So what we have found in our research is that on the initial submission, the Genpact team doesn't actually look at the description necessarily. They'll only kind of take a closer look if they choose to deny it and you resubmit it. Then they'll take a look at, okay, what's going on here? So make sure that you have all of this information in order for you to, again, get your dispute successfully reviewed. Now, another pro tip a lot of folks miss, Walmart does not have autosave in APDP. So after you have submitted all of this information, make sure that you hit that add button, and that will kind of save it to this particular claim line that you're trying to dispute. From there, you are going to then kind of attach the proof documentation utilizing this attach proof for multi-lines link. And then, as we kind of mentioned, examples of proof you can submit. So if you are a prepaid supplier, meaning you deliver product to the Walmart DCs, then proofs of delivery, of course. If you are a collect supplier, Walmart picks up from your warehouse and you're going to need to provide a bill of lading. Other examples of, frequent documentation that we see are things like your OSA, so your online supplier agreement. So if you're trying to dispute something like allowances or payment terms or anything like that, you're going to need that. We also have, we've also seen folks submit like emails from their buyers and things like that saying, hey, yes, I do approve for this to get paid back. So you're going to make sure that essentially whatever dispute code you're trying to go after, make sure that you are associating the right kind of proof documentation for it to give you the best chance of success. So I am going to recommend, again, if you guys are kind of newer to the space, to the individual disputing space, Supplier Wiki, we have a free ebook called Deduction Codes Explained, and we literally will go into every single code there is at Walmart, tell you what the code is, why you probably got it, what documentation you need to dispute it, and kind of what success can look like. Really, really recommend getting that because we spent about 1.5 years doing the research to create the book because, again, probably to no one's surprise, this is not information you can get easily on Walmart. So you can use that. It's completely free. Download it and utilize it. So just some more pro tips for you guys, the different file formats that are acceptable for documentation. So you can see here, obviously, they only allow things like PDFs, JPEGs, Word documents, emails, so on and so forth. So you want to make sure that you are submitting the right file format or you're going to have a lot of grief because it may get kicked back to you. So after you've submitted all of your information and your documentation, you're going to hit the next button. And then from there, essentially, it's kind of entered into, what do you want to do with it next? So you can either hit previous to go back and edit the claim if needed, or you can hit save to create a draft of it, or you can hit submit kind of further on to actually send the dispute over to Genpact to get reviewed. So one thing to note here is that your drafts are only saved for 14 days. So if you create a claim and don't touch it on day 15, it's going to get canceled out of the system and you have to start from scratch. Excuse me. Okay, so take a drink real quick. Okay, so after you guys have essentially put in all the information, from there you can hit the submit button and it's going to get sent over for review. And again, as we've talked about, on average, we see about 51 days between the time you hit submit to the time you get an answer. Some will be auto approved. So usually if it's like a lesser amount, we have seen things get approved literally within 24 hours, but some will take kind of the 3, 4, 5 months at times in order for you to get some sort of response. So again, on average, we see about 51 days, but in the last quarter, we've seen that kind of increase a little bit over time. Okay, so that's how you dispute claims. And again, friendly reminder, kind of invoices is like that parent amount, and then claims are for the different lines within a specific PO or a specific invoice. I'm going to walk you guys through the process of actually disputing invoices. So this is when Walmart takes a deduction off the entirety of the invoice that you send to them. Usually you'll see this for things like code 25s, code 10s, code 11s, code 11s. So more around allowances and things like that. Okay, so what you're going to do, so this one requires a little bit more nuance. Apologies. So if there is no claim record in APIS, that is kind of your one and only hint that you need to create a dispute from an invoice. So you'll search for the claim, you'll find that, hey, there's nothing there. And then from there, you'll be able to say, okay, based on that, I know I need to go and try and create a dispute from an actual invoice in its entirety. So you'll be able to see, again, this is an APIS. Your invoice search results will look something like this. So again, you guys can see here, this minus amount is essentially what Walmart has deducted for the entirety of this invoice. So I am not going to get too deep in the weeds because the process is pretty similar to the claim side. I'll just point out some of the differences between, when you're trying to dispute a claim versus an invoice. So obviously, when you create the dispute, you're going to create the dispute based on the invoice instead of that claim. And then again, you're going to put in that invoice number, or you can select the date ranges. Similar to before, you can only do a 10-day date range. So just be aware of that. Again, challenges, you can't do it in large time chunks. You can only do it kind of a week and a half at a time. That's fine. So again, very similar. You're going to see a list of invoices that pop up. And then when you find the right one that you want to go after, you're going to hit that create dispute button. And then you guys can kind of see here, rather than claim lines, like what we had in the original screenshots, you can basically just submit one dispute for that invoice. So again, you're going to make sure that you select this button, kind of add the information that you need to. So you are actually going to have to provide the deduction code, which is kind of funny, seeing as Walmart should be able to just port that over, but you'll need to make sure that you have the deduction code, the amount that you're disputing. So if you're disputing the entirety of what was deducted or part of that, and then again, kind of adding that description. I'm going to say it again, make sure you hit that add button, because we've had folks that will work a lot and really hard on getting disputes submitted, forget to hit that add button, hit next, and nothing gets saved. So make sure that you are hitting the add button in order to actually save those changes to the dispute. Very similar to before. From there, you kind of hit next. If you want to move on to the next page, you can save it as a draft. You can go previous to edit it as needed, or you can hit the submit button to actually send it over to Genpact to get it reviewed. So just like claims, you'll know that you have successfully submitted a dispute when you actually have a pop-up box that will say, hey, this is what has been disputed, and these are the case numbers kind of associated with that. So in APDP, you will have this information kind of listed for you, so you don't need to worry about taking screenshots or anything like that. But I would pay attention, because if you do want to reach out to Walmart with any questions, these are the numbers that they're going to ask you for. So just make sure when they're asking for the dispute case number, you know kind of what they're talking about. Okay, so moving on, we've kind of talked about the actual tactical side on how you literally go in, log in, and submit a dispute. After, we want to kind of talk about what happens after that dispute gets submitted. So APDP has multiple statuses, as we kind of talked about, for the disputes. And we call out here kind of the difference between APDP and direct commerce. But if you're moving from settlement to individual disputing, kind of all you need to know are these names in the bolded blue. So once you submit a dispute to Walmart or Genpact, it enters what we call the Walmart research phase. So essentially, as the name implies, they are researching it and kind of taking a look at what you've submitted. From there, if they kick anything back to you, it'll enter what is called supplier action status. So, again, as the name implies, hey, we found something, it's missing, some proof documentation, or we're not quite sure what you're asking for. We need you to kind of take action on this that has been sent over. And then obviously kind of the rest are going to be denied. So, hey, we didn't see a reason to approve what you disputed. Canceled is canceled, and approved is, anything that's been approved. And I'll talk a little bit in a couple of slides on the nuance between kind of denied and canceled, because it sounds similar, but it's actually different. So yeah, I'm going to go through kind of the statuses one by one. So draft, again, as the name implies, the dispute has been started, but it has not yet been completed. So you can still make edits during the draft phase. So obviously you can submit that to Genpact, or you can cancel it out. And if you don't submit that draft, it'll get canceled out on its own after 14 days. So why I like to make the delineation between draft and Walmart research is because when a dispute enters Walmart research phase, you cannot touch it. You cannot edit it. You cannot add documentation. You can't do anything to it. So it is really, really important that you get your dispute right the first time, because what we hate to see happen is when you kind of rush through and you submit stuff and maybe you forget to attach a POD or whatever it is. And then again, on average, it's that 51-day wait time. So now, you've submitted something, it's going to get denied or kicked back to you because you don't have this POD, but you literally cannot touch it for, on average 51 days. So really try and make sure that when you guys are creating those individual disputes, that you are getting it as accurate as possible. Because again, once it gets submitted to Walmart or Genpact, you cannot touch it until it gets kicked back to you or it gets denied, and then you can start the process again. So really, really be aware of that. Unfortunately, this does make the individual dispute process a pretty manual, system, as you guys can imagine, because you're having to go into every single claim, make sure that you are doing the right drop down buttons, make sure you're typing in the right numbers, the decimal point is in the right place. And so it can be a very manual process when you compare it to settlement, which I'm sure a lot of you guys were on before. So yeah, after, Walmart has had a chance to review it, they can send it back to you into, again, what we call supplier action. So there are two types of supplier action kind of buckets. So one of them is called denial pending, and another one is called sent for revision. So kind of the nuance between these two. So if you have something that is denial pending, this is essentially Walmart or Genpact's way of saying, I don't really see any proof here, unless you send me something that is really, kind of material evidence that's really going to change. You're probably just going to get a denial. And if you don't take any action on denial pending, it'll automatically move into denied status. Sent for revision is a little bit different. Sent for revision is kind of Genpact's way of saying, hey, I don't have all the information I need, but maybe the decimal point is in the wrong place, or maybe you picked the wrong vendor number or whatever it is. So I know that I should probably approve this for you, but I need you to kind of revise this so that I can basically note it down and give you that approval. So now the kicker for this one, sent for revision, is that if you don't make the revisions that they request, they don't automatically approve it, even though they'll happily automatically deny it. They will actually cancel the whole dispute out because they'll say, hey, it doesn't match up what our system sees. So, I can't approve that, but I'm going to cancel it. And then you essentially get kicked to the back of the queue and you can try and submit a dispute again, this time with the right decimal point or proof documentation or whatever it is. So again, you really need to be on top of all of these things that get sent back to you, because if not, again, it'll automatically get denied or automatically get canceled, both of which are not really advantageous for you, the supplier. One thing to note, kind of key point, is that you have 7 days to take action. once it gets submitted back to you in supplier action status. So you really want to make sure, again, that you are kind of logging in, I would say at a minimum once a week. We have teams that will log in almost every single day to make sure that they're staying on top of supplier action and also to handle any new deductions that come in. So if something moves, if your deduction dispute moves into canceled status, essentially what happens there is that, you've kind of proved to, or failed to prove why the deduction should be repaid, or you can choose to kind of cancel the deduction dispute on your own. So maybe, you're working with your transportation team and you're like, oh, wait, our bad, we really didn't ship this in full. You can choose to cancel the dispute on your own. So when this happens, if you do choose to cancel it, you can't like reopen a claim necessarily. What happens is you have to create a brand new dispute, which you are allowed to do, but just something to be aware of. It does get, again, because you can't reopen it, it's not like, oh, oops, we missed our 7-day window. Here's this change that you wanted us to do. Can you quickly reevaluate it? Again, you kind of get kicked to the back of the line. So make sure that if you're going to cancel something or Walmart's going to cancel something, be aware and try and catch it before it happens. So denied status, again, kind of obvious what it sounds like. Basically, Walmart is saying, we've reviewed the proof that you've sent over. It's not sufficient. We don't agree with it. So we're going to go ahead and deny this dispute that you sent over. You can create a new dispute. I believe Walmart caps you out at 3 times. So just something to be aware of when you are trying to submit multiple disputes to Walmart. So then, approved, of course, this is the green. This is what everyone wants to see. Essentially, Walmart has reviewed the proof documentation that you've sent over, and they're like, you're right, we should have paid you in full for this or whatever it is. And then they will go ahead and pay you back. And what this looks like is that this will be usually repaid on a future check. So you'll see a check line come through later on, and it's going to be for more than what you invoice for. And that is usually if you have a deduction dispute that has been approved by the GenPack team. Okay, so one thing that I want to call out, because this is probably a foreign concept to those of you guys that were on the settlement process before, Walmart is a little notorious for doing what they call a negative approval. So what that means is essentially, they can give you a deduction, you go in, dispute it and say, hey, Walmart, you deducted me on a code 22, which is a shortage. That's not correct. We shipped you in full. Here's my POD, whatever it is. They can approve it and then rededuct that same amount under a different claim code. Very common. We've seen them go from 22s to 15. So a 15 is like a concealed shortage. So what that means is, Walmart received it in full. So they'll say, oh, you're right, we did receive it in full based on this code 22, but then we opened the box and half the product was missing, which is a concealed shortage. So they didn't realize that it was short until they opened the box, and then basically rededuct you for the same amount. And I will say just a couple of things to note. Number one, we are seeing this happen more and more. Now, that said, I don't want to panic anyone. This is happening probably less than 5% of the time for the suppliers that we work with, but it is happening and it is growing. And then another thing to keep in mind is that concealed shortages are extremely difficult to fight because it's very he said, she said. Obviously, with shortage codes, really easy to say, here's my proof of delivery, here's my bill of lading, we're all good here, but how do you fight, oh, I opened the truck and a box was missing, or, oh, I unwrapped a pallet and a case was missing. So these can be really, really difficult to fight. And so we can definitely advise on best practices and kind of share what other folks in the industry are working with and doing. But just wanted to kind of call this to your attention that this is something that you are likely to see as you start to go into individual disputing from the settlement process. Okay, so really quickly wanted to talk about dispute resolution and make sure that I have enough time to answer you guys' questions if you have any. But as I mentioned earlier, on average, we see the average approval time is about 51 days, as I mentioned. About 32% get approved within 2 days. So again, if you guys are kind of newer to the process, just something to share is, so Walmart does have thresholds where they will automatically approve the disputes. Usually it's for a certain like code type and dollar amount combination. We have not yet been able to determine what that combination is. If any of you guys have any insight, please feel free to share it with us. But about, again, 32% of the time, we'll see this stuff kind of get auto approved within that 2-day time period. But if not, again, it can be, up to 51 days, sometimes 4 to 5 months. On average, once you've gotten approval from Walmart, it takes about 7 days to then actually receive payment. And this is true like 90+% of the time. So if you are taking longer than 7 days to get the payment after a dispute has been approved, there are ways to kind of reach out to Walmart and make sure that you're getting paid on those disputes that have been approved. And again, we're always happy to share that resource for you guys. Okay, so I think I've covered most of the heavy hitting topics. A lot of stuff, a lot of, changes. Again, if you guys are going from settlement to individual disputing, but hopefully this is helpful as kind of a first step. And again, we've got a lot of really great content around individual disputing. So if you guys treat this like a 101 course, we've got a lot of like 201 courses on Supplier Wiki. If you're ever curious to kind of learn more, but ready for questions, Melody, if there are any.
There are a lot of questions and I kind of held off because
Okay.
of the volume. So let's go. This one was actually answered, but just to reiterate, how far back can I go to file a claim?
Yeah, very, very good question. So if you have never been on the settlement process, so kind of 2 key distinctions. If you have never been on the settlement process, you can go back up to 2 years. From the claim date, basically. So we are in December 2022. So you can go back as far as December 2020 and basically kind of go after all of those claims. And essentially kind of it's a rolling time period. So, once we get into January, you lose access to kind of those December 2020 claims, so on and so forth. So you really want to make sure that you are kind of staying on top of that dispute window. If you were on the settlement process, you can only essentially go back as far as kind of the last settlement that you closed. So I believe a lot of folks right now are wrapping up like Q1 or Q2 of 2022. So that's kind of as far back as you can go. So let's just say, for example, the last settlement period you did with Walmart was Q2 2022. You can now start individually disputing claims from Q3 2022 and onwards. Now, one thing I will note, if you are interested in individually disputing, you do need to tell Walmart that you wish to move to the individual dispute. And there is actually a form letter that you can submit. And again, we're happy to share that with you guys if that would be helpful. I think the next slide has our email address. Yes. So we're happy if you guys want to, obviously you can respond to any of the emails that we send, or you can reach out directly to Melody or myself. We'll point you in the right direction, but you do need to let Walmart know that you want to be moved off of settlement into individual disputing, because if not, they'll just say, oh, you're still part of, Q3 settlement, for example. So just be aware of that.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So we had another question come in, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I also asked our director of product his thoughts. So is settlement still in place for SAMs?
That is a very good question. From what we have seen, we have not heard anything about settlement for Sam's Club going away. All the communication that we have seen so far is just for Walmart. But again, you guys on the call, if y'all know any different, if you are hearing anything different and do business with Sam's Club, please feel free to share that, with everybody. We all can learn together. But from what I understand, this is only impacting Walmart, not Sam's Club yet.
And that's exactly what Eric, our director of product, said. I haven't heard specifically, but SAMs can be disputed through APDP. He said he wouldn't be surprised if they started to retire SAM settlement process as well. They're reaching out to vendors by 6-digit number, it seems, and SAM business would have a unique 6-digit. So that is what we know on it.
Yes, and if we hear anything, you guys know you'll be the first to hear from us. And similarly, if you guys ever hear any new information and would like to share it with kind of the larger supplier network as a whole, please feel free to share that with us. We'll credit you accordingly, or if you want to stay kind of behind the scenes, we're happy to kind of share the information. Again, this is the fluffy side of SupplyPike coming out, but we really believe that it takes a village to be a good supplier to Walmart and Sam's Club. So, and all the retailers. So the more we can, learn together, the better for everybody.
Perfect. All right. So we have one question, which I think this person might be talking about DCI. So I am already using an operating APDP. The previous site I used to use has been retired. How do I bring the issues from the APDP system for more research and resolution? Do you have any insight into that?
So I would say it does sound like they were previously using DCI Direct Commerce. And could you repeat the second half, Melody? They're trying to do a little bit more research. Is that right?
How do I bring old issues into the APDP system for more research and resolution?
That is a very good question. So I assume they're trying to port some data from DCI into APDP. So unfortunately, as far as we know, that is not something that is possible to do. Essentially, what is in DCI kind of lives in DCI, and whatever Walmart wanted to port over to APDP has already been done. To give you guys a little bit of context, why DCI is still around, even though it's officially retired, is because APDP only supports a certain subset of codes. So Walmart has about 75 different AP related deduction codes. APDP does support a vast majority of them, but there are still a few that they do not support. And so with that, we have seen buyers actually point suppliers to DCI, to these like really, really tiny subset of codes that APDP doesn't support yet. I will say one thing to think about is if you are currently on DCI, Walmart has said at some point they do plan to completely sunset access to the app, meaning you won't even be able to log in anymore. So if you do have that historical information that is important, that is kind of older than, let's say, Q4 of last year, because that's when the migration happened, I would really consider trying to figure out a way to export that data. Either working with a company like SupplyPike, where we can help you kind of automate that whole export process, or start manually exporting, because at some point you will likely lose access to DCI in the future. And, again, you don't want to, with Walmart, you know how it is. One day you're going to wake up and try and log in and they're like, surprise, the website is gone. So, try and get ahead of it as much as you can.
That's helpful. So we have one question, and I just want to, I can kind of talk through this. So Walmart has a new bot survey around MFA. Any guidance on that? So if you are a SupplyPike customer, we do have guidance on how to answer those questions in order to keep your integration with SupplyPike up and running. If you're not a SupplyPike customer, please still reach out to us. Those are our emails right there, and we can kind of help guide you. Just the answers might be a little bit different depending on what software or services that you're using. So we can help you with that either way. Just might be a little bit more general if you're not a SupplyPike customer. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to, and yes, the deep dive on preventing and disputing Walmart deduction shortages is right now doing a 4.4, but we are fixing that. So that is in the process. That should be up and running any second now. Sorry about that, you guys. There you go. It's up and running now. So that link now should be working for you.
Live fixing code. The SupplyPike way.
Working with Walmart deduction code manual. I can send that to you guys. And okay. I am going to go to the Q&A portion. I know you guys have a lot of questions. I apologize. Okay, we answered that one. How many times can an invoice be disputed in APDP?
So from what I understand, Melody, you can So I believe you can basically, so if you submit a deduction and it gets pushed back to you, you can basically resubmit that up to 3 times. And on the third time, what happens is it gets canceled out. So then you have to basically, then you go back to the queue. So you can start it again, but essentially you're going to the very back of the line. So let's just say, you've submitted dispute 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they kick it back to you, you kick it back to them, so on and so forth. Again, when you're still in that supplier action status, you're still kind of at the top of the list, so to speak. So they're actively reviewing those and seeing what you've changed and so on and so forth. But again, on that third try, it enters canceled status. And then basically that particular dispute is closed, and then you can still dispute that same claim or that same invoice, but you have to basically start a fresh one altogether. So quote unquote unlimited, but then just be aware of kind of the constraints of what that means after the third time it gets canceled out of the system.
That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so sometimes I get a denied wrong code, cancel dispute, and reopen with the correct code. How do I do that? So they get it denied, and the reason is wrong code. And then I'm getting the guidance that the Walmart is giving them is canceling the dispute and reopening with the correct code.
That is okay. That always makes me laugh, because the whole point of APDP was that it could just automatically connect with APIS, so that it's like porting all the right information over Walmart. So I would say, if you are getting a wrong code, I think the easiest thing would be to go and check in APIS, and essentially make sure that you are utilizing whatever code has been deducted. So if an APIS, $123.45 were deducted under code 22, make sure that you are utilizing that code for the $123.45 in APDP. Sometimes what gets people tripped up is you can have an invoice deduction and a claim deduction. And so which one do you utilize? So again, if you're disputing the claim, make sure you're using the claim deduction code. If you're using the invoice, using the invoice deduction code. And honestly, sometimes if that is still not like working, we've also seen folks, so you can either reach out directly, so you can kind of kick that back to Walmart and say, advise on what code you want me to use. Similarly, there's also, Walmart has something called EBS, or the Enterprise Business Systems. And we have their phone numbers and email addresses. And they're an internal Walmart finance function where you can actually escalate your questions and dispute questions too. So they can actually advise you like, oh, this is where this dispute is in the queue, or they can kind of sort of maybe help to expedite things. It really depends. But at the very least, you're going to contact a human being that can kind of actually go in and advise, what needs to be changed or updated. So EBS is the group that you should reach out to if you have questions at Walmart.
Yes, and I'm trying to share that information right now because we had a couple of questions about it. So I'm going to paste this. I apologize. The formatting is probably going to be terrible. So please ignore the formatting, but this should be the information that you need. Okay. Perfect. So we are right on time. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Merry Christmas to y'all as well. If you want to stay on to learn more about Deductions Navigator, we would love to show you how we kind of solve Walmart deductions for your business. If this is where you leave us, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Stacy, for presenting all of that amazing content. And hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Please fill out the feedback surveys that we're sending after this. We always comb through those. And Jenna, let me see while she's pulling that up if I can get to your question. Okay, before you jump off, I do not have an option to select claim or invoice in APDP for creating a dispute. This changed about a month back. Now I only have one search box. Any idea why this is different for me?
That is a very good question, Jenna. I'm not sure. Do you think, Melody, could we maybe shoot that over to Eric and see if he can do a quick answer while we still have Jenna on the call for the next couple of minutes? But yeah, so while we've got the rest of you guys, we're going to do a super, super quick, literally 5-minute overview of kind of our take on Deductions Navigator here at SupplyPike. So as I kind of walked you guys through the process of individual disputing an APDP, is it possible? Yes. Can it be done? Yes. Is it also kind of miserable? Yes. And so we at SupplyPike obviously try to, you know, make your lives as suppliers a little bit easier so that you guys can focus on the work that matters, and not having to fight with yet another Walmart internal application. So our solution is called Deductions Navigator. You guys can kind of see here, I've just got a demo company pulled up, but essentially how it works is we integrate directly with retailer portals, and we're able to pull deductions and finance related information out to kind of give you a really clean snapshot of your business and also take action on those deductions. So you can see here kind of across the top, we have a dashboard page as well as a deductions page, and I'll make sure we kind of go through both really, really quickly. But you guys can kind of see here on the dashboard page, we have dashboardy things. And, you know, this looks like a really kind of obvious sort of information that, you know, you should be able to access, but you can't in Retail Link. There's no easy way to do that. Beauty of software is, again, because we're pulling this data out every single day, we're able to do a lot of the aggregations and calculations for you so that you know exactly where you stand, in this case, you know, as it stands with your deductions. So we're able to pull things like how much deductions you've received, what is actionable still on the table, so stuff you've not yet taken action on that you can go after and try and win, what has been approved and is waiting repayment, what Walmart has actually paid you back, and kind of what your win rate looks like. So what I really, really find powerful about Deductions Navigator is, in addition to kind of the, you know, table stakes numbers, we also give a lot of context so that you can be a little bit more strategic about how you manage your business. Because we all know that at the end of the day, deductions, they're just kind of a lagging indicator of stuff that's going on further up in your supply chain, right? So if you're getting a shortage type deduction, it might be because of how you're shipping, how you're packaging, how you're invoicing. If you're getting an allowance type deduction, it's an indication of how is your contracts set up. So I really love that Deductions Navigator will kind of help to actually tell you where a vast majority of your problems are coming from. So that, again, in this example, it's a code 25, which is an invoice issue. Usually this is due to timing. And so a lot of times in this example, you could just change when you're sending your invoice out, and you can eliminate, you know, 50% of your deductions just like that. So really, really nice to not only get the money back, which is important, but also understand kind of where the holes are in the leaky bucket so you can start to plug them and you know, not be adding more deductions into that bucket. So other things that we do is we'll also show you information like your claims by item number. So, you know, are any items, you know, making up a disproportionate amount of your deductions? So, hey, I need to work with my sales team or my transport team or whatever it is to really understand, you know, this is not a top 5 item. Why is it a top 5 deduction for us, as an example? We'll also give you information like deductions by location. So are there any particular DCs that are giving you any headaches, so that you can, again, work with your RM or SSM at Walmart to say, hey, you know, DC 7026, for example, is really causing us a lot of pain. Let's figure out why are they not able to receive our products the way they should. So on the deductions page, we will pull every deduction that you've ever received, both from APDP and DCI, which is really nice. We go back up to 2 years, or we can, because that's kind of Walmart's statute of limitations. And just to show you guys kind of the beauty of how nice it is to have software do this for you, is we're stitching all of the relevant information together for you. So we're pulling details like claim information, check information, PO information, all in one page. You know, so number one, we're kind of surfacing that number up for you to say, hey, here's all the information that you need. Secondly, we actually will do validity checks for you. So we'll say, based on all of this information that we're seeing, because again, you know, we're integrating directly with your carriers and with your retailer portals, we can actually make validity calls to say, hey, this is probably an invalid deduction and you should probably go after it because, you know, you can. Once you've decided, hey, it's an invalid deduction, I'm going to go ahead and fight that. then we also will automatically pull all of the proof documentation that you need. So yes, this is a demo account, but this is exactly what it would look like for you as well. We've got over 100 carrier integrations and 3PL integrations, so we can automatically pull back your POs, your invoices, your claims, your BOLs, so on and so forth. And then because we have all this information and this business logic, we can even tell you, hey, this is ready to dispute. You've got everything you need to fight this particular deduction. And then from there, you literally hit submit dispute and we'll send it off for you to Genpact and keep track of it for you from there. So we cut down what is usually 20 to 30 minute process down to literally one click, which is really, really nice. So last thing I'll call out and then let you guys go, I know I'm a couple of minutes over, is in addition to kind of the individual disputing, we've also just recently launched the ability to do bulk disputing as well as auto disputing. So for bulk disputing, exactly what it sounds like, you can kind of select up to 100 at a time and submit all those disputes. For automated disputing, that is even better. It's like 0 clicks. You literally will set thresholds. So you can say for codes 22, 24, and 25 under $500, submit them. I don't even want to see them. So you don't even have to lift a finger. All you have to do is work on every other deduction that does not necessarily fit that threshold. So that is all I've got. The last thing that I wanted to share, in case you guys are curious, is obviously I was pulling demo information, which, doesn't necessarily show you guys kind of the size of the prize for your companies. If you are curious and would like to see, we do a completely free business analysis. We will tell you what is on the table, what you haven't gone after yet, what your number one, codes are, and your worst performing items and DCs and all of that good stuff completely for free. So then you can kind of make a better judgment call on whether you want to continue exploring a relationship with SupplyPike or not. But yeah, that's all I've got. If you guys have any questions, you know where to find us. And hopefully if we don't see you guys, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.